Brown colors are dark versions of yellow, orange, red, and you can easily mix brown colors yourself because they contain red, blue and yellow, and the main part always is red and yellow and a small amount of blue. So let us take a look. And of course it's impossible to show all combinations that are possible, but when you get the idea you can do it easily yourself. Here we have primary magenta, pyrrole red, cadmium red light, so that's a little bit towards the orange side, and here I have primary yellow. Now if I mix primary magenta with a little bit of cyan, then I get this purplish color. If I add yellow, and I build it slowly, so I add a tiny amount of yellow, you see already immediately it shifts towards more of a brown color. I'll add slightly more over here. See what happens? And I can add even more. There you go, you see? And of course I can add even more. So an orangey brown color. But the thing is, there are endless possibilities. So magenta with more cyan gives different results. So here I have more blue, kind of purple. And if I add yellow now, in this instant, there's so much blue in this color that it becomes a little bit more towards the gray side. So if you want to make more of brown color, then you try to find the balance. So you add more magenta, for instance, in this case. See, now it gets brown. But again, you can balance this by adding even more magenta if you want, and as well add the third primary yellow, a brown color. Now I take pyrrole red, and pyrrole red theoretically consists of magenta and a little bit of yellow already, so it's kind of a shortcut. So if I put it over here and I add a little bit of extra yellow, then I can make it more orangey, of course. So now it contains only magenta and yellow, but I've increased the part of yellow with primary yellow. So what is missing now? The third primary, and that is cyan. So when I add cyan, I get a brown color. But you see, now it's a little bit of red brown. Now this is then what we call a very warm kind of brown. But when I add more cyan, it gets slightly cooler. And do you see the problem? It's impossible to show all the combinations, because I can as well add more yellow, of course, as well. So if I add more yellow, I get this more orangey kind of color. Oh yeah, and that's very interesting by the way. If you have this kind of orangey kind of color, and you add slightly more cyan, only so slightly, then we get something that's very close to yellow ochre. You see? There you go. Now, then of course we can already guess what happens when we use cadmium red light, that is orangey. Then we get to these colors very quickly, because this contains even more yellow of itself. So it contains a little bit of magenta, a little bit of yellow, theoretically speaking, of course. So if we add cyan to this color, we immediately get a brown kind of color. There you go. So this instantly looks quite similar to burnt sienna, a famous brown color. So I add more cyan here to show you the effect. Then it gets more towards this kind of brown. And again, if I add more yellow, I go the other way. We get these kinds of yellows. of brown colors, you see. Now, and of course, if we exaggerate it even more, when I make a very, very yellow orangey color like this, then we get something like this if I add a little bit of cyan, slight amount. There we go. Then we have a kind of brown as well. And maybe I'll add some more yellow just to show you some possibilities. So here, this is very, very yellow, this color. And I'll add a slight touch of cyan. You see, you have to be very careful. Now, of course, chances are that we already go towards green, because there is a moment that it shifts more towards green, but still it has something to do with brown, you see. Now, there are also other ways you can make brown colors. You could also say, I grab a little bit of cadmium red light, for instance, so a red color, and you add a little bit of red or black. Then as well you get brown colors. Only thing is, in this case, you're dependent on your black color. There are more warm blacks and there are more cool blacks, so that influences the kind of brown that you could get. See, but that's another way to do it. And of course, you don't necessarily need this kind of blue. You can do it with other blue colors as well. That's the last thing I will show. In this case, I'll grab some ultramarine blue. Where shall I put it? The whole palette is flooded by colors. Let's grab a little bit of pyrrole red this time again. So here we go. So then we get a color like this, and now you guessed, if I add more ultramarine, then if I add yellow, you see we get colors like this. So the same story all the time. It's a combination of the three primaries, and you can balance it the way you prefer, or what you need, of course. I hope that was helpful. See you next time.